Live from Las Vegas. You guys ready to do this or what?
Let's go.
Mic check, mic check.
Mike.
Hey, welcome to another episode of This Is Our Normal Podcast. I'm your host, Saul Jones. I'm sitting here as always with our audio engineer, Joel Cowan.
Hey, guys.
And my co-host, Brian Hoodie.
That's me.
Don't call him Sweatshirt.
Or whatever.
And our guest today, very special guest, former owner of Solutions Recovery, the place where I went and got sober, saved my life. Then he was the VP of the Nevada region of American Addiction Centers, and his name is Dave Marlon. All right, so before we get started, I just want to remind everybody to go to our website at thisournormalpodcast.com. You can find everything you need to know about us. There's links to iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, Stitcher, all that good stuff. You guys know the deal. Mainly, we want to thank everybody who's gone to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating, left us comments. We really appreciate it. And as always, these podcasts are brought to you by Serenity Sober Living down in South Orange County. We highly recommend this place. We have men's and women's sober living. Women's start up in August. And if you come there right now, I'm a house manager. You get to live with me.
Dude, we're trying to get them to come, not
not
push them away. Yeah.
But yeah, thanks a lot. Boom. Okay. Dave, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me here today.
Thanks for coming on, man. You're our biggest guest. This is seriously, man. I'm extremely excited. I talked about you. I had some other guests from Solutions Recovery that had come on that had gone through the program there, and it saved their lives as well. And everybody has nothing but great things to say about the place that you created, man.
Thanks. I put my heart and soul in it, and there were 330 employees who just really cared, and our primary intervention was the use of love.
Yeah, it showed, man. It poured out of that place, and it was a place like no other. We talked a little bit about how, it wasn't just a place where you just go to get sober, but you learn about any medications you're taking. There were classes on that. There were nutrition classes. It was a place that got you prepared to, when you get sober and get healthy, to be a contributing member of society when you come out. So instead of just dumping you out on the street,
Yeah, I heard a little bit about all that yesterday. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Sets that place apart from everywhere else.
Yeah. Thanks. It was fun. There's a rock band that you all know the name of, and one of the members came, and when he left, he was, starting a new life.
Yeah.
And he said, "Man, this isn't rehab. This is sober college.
Yeah.
This is learn how to live sober." And then
reals.
each member of the whole band ended up coming through Solutions, which was a really cool gig.
That band was known as the Beatles. Yeah. So, but no, I want to talk a little bit about. I'd like more places to be like Solutions, because it also, it had it was a campus, like you said, like a college campus where there was a place that gave us haircuts once a week. It made you feel like a human again. It humanized you, and a lot of us coming into treatment don't feel like humans. But your place, your place really did that. Really changed.
Thanks. There were a lot of amenities or positive components, although the disease of addiction's evolving.
Yes, it is.
And unfortunately, although I think that open campus idea that we had 13 years ago that ran and helped 5,000 people get clean and sober, I think that was a great idea during the time. But with the advent of fentanyl and it showing up in the meth, in the cocaine, in the heroin, I think going forward that treatment needs to evolve.
Absolutely.
And having open campuses, I don't think works right now.
What would your idea be? Do you have an idea of what it might need to be?
I do, and sadly, it's evolving, because when I went and got sober, I went to a house. I had 6 other people living to it in Southern California. They drove a van, a druggy buggy.
A druggy buggy.
Very familiar.
Buddy used to drive one of those.
Oh, nice. Well, the place I went to, we went to a meeting every morning at 7, and I asked if I could run, and they let me. So I ran 7 miles to the AA meeting every morning for 30 days while I was in rehab, and it was really part of getting healthy, and, not killing myself or poisoning myself every day.
Yeah, for sure.
It was a beautiful experience. Yeah. But as far as the evolution, unfortunately, more closed facilities with safer are what's needed right now. Even though I would, prefer to go kick it in Malibu at a place where I could still meet my guy.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of us do. I need structure like that sometimes. I've tried it both ways. Both ways did get me sober. I think a lot of it has to do with what kind of dedication and work we're all willing to put in when we get there. But another approach that I learned at Solutions was the science base of it. You had Dr. Joseph Bradley there, and that guy is absolutely brilliant. And he's the one that taught me. I talk about on here all the time about the cerebral cortex and the addiction coming from the midbrain and the difference between the two, and where our willpower and characteristics come from the cerebral cortex. And to try to get those to match up, it takes retraining. And so, like you're saying, a stricter place could also do that too. Where we have a lot more structure, but I loved it there so much, man.
Thank you. I loved it there too. And I encourage you to get Dr. Bradley to come on next, because he helped me as well. And even though I was many years sober, learning that the decision-making part of my brain, that frontal lobe, that when I blacked out, that part actually got blacked out, while my midbrain was keeping my heart and lungs, was keeping my hunger for sex, drugs, rock and roll going. And when I understood that when I had 6 beers, that I shut part of that down, which contributed to the lack of me making intelligent decisions, it really helped me understand the science behind what was going on with my disease.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it made me understand that while I was still responsible for my actions when using it separated the fact that I wasn't a bad person, because it showed me where my disease was coming from and where I was at, and that changed my life going through that. By the way, if you have any way of getting Dr. Bradley on here too, I'd hook him up with us, man. We'd love to. But
let's shoot him a text.
Yeah, all right. But I want to hear a little bit about your story. I know a little bit about it, but I'd like to hear what was life like for you leading up to right before going into recovery yourself.
My childhood was typical. I grew up on the East Coast, and like you may have heard, I had alcoholic symptoms before I ever had a drink. And, in college, I was a late bloomer. I didn't really use drugs until I was a sophomore. And I really didn't drink heavy until I was a sophomore in college. But I started partying, and I loved it. And I was a cool cat. I was selling drugs. I became the legislative president. And I ran onto the platform that I was going to use all of Polity's money to buy beer. I was dating an organized girl, so she did all the paperwork for me. And I grew my hair, and I was trying to take mushrooms and figure out things. I ended up traveling with the Grateful Dead for a little while. And then I developed a work problem, because I graduated from college and I had a job. And the job was a hassle.
They get in the way. They get in the way.
They totally got in the way of my life. I then developed a wife problem.
I had one of those.
She totally got in the way of my life and my party. And so now I had work and wife
interfering.
Totally. And then I had child.
So
I had the trifecta of problems.
I managed to slip that one.
So I then had a kid, and all of these things were, taken away from what I like to do. Which at that point became locking myself in the garage with a Ziploc baggie and a 30-pack and a fifth.
And it just seems so casual and normal at the time.
Right? It did. Check my watch. Okay, good. I'm locking the door. See y'all in 12, 14 hours. And, in the summers here in Vegas, it would get hot, and I'd still be in my garage.
How did you do that, man, in the heat?
It was a small price to pay to get what I wanted.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And I have a very high pain tolerance. And I spent the last few years almost in total isolation. and I would have called it partying, but I was just in terror and misery.
Right. The
You
fun
know,
was gone at that point.
fun,
It's-
fun was long gone.
Now it's just maintaining.
Yeah, to the point where I tapped out and I asked a buddy. I said, "Hey, I may have a little drinking problem."
Yeah.
He gave me the name of some
Still not
places.
sure.
Downplays that.
So I did what I knew how to do. I lied to everyone I knew, and I told them I was going on vacation.
Yeah. I tried that the first round.
And I went to a rehab, and for me, it did it.
Yeah.
I went to every group. I brought a clipboard, and when they gave us assignments, I did them. I was like
Nice.
the total nerd
Yeah.
in rehab, and I was all in trying to sort it out. They gave us 2 hours of gym time, so I ran in the morning. I maxed gym time.
Jeez.
I did the homework assignments. I remember there's a funny story I tell. There was a bunch of hot girls in the program
Go
while I was
on.
going through. And
Saul's excited.
I would dream while I'm in the
Yeah.
in the groups and stuff about having children and, and running away with them.
Yeah.
But right around the last day, the counselor ended up scolding 4 of the folks in my group because they ended up that they were sleeping with each other,
Oh shit.
and I couldn't believe it. Because one,
This
I was
whole
like
time.
the nerdy AA guy, right? I'm like, this is like this sanctity, this totally beautiful thing,
Yeah.
and you guys have been not only violating, but since you've been doing this, you've been scamming me as well as you've
Yeah,
been
let's focus
scamming
on
the
what's
counselor.
important here.
You scamming me.
And by the way, why didn't she pick me instead?
Right.
So I was really appalled and disappointed in them. And one thing I remember is that they didn't stay sober,
Yeah.
and I did.
Yeah.
So even though I was the nerd
Right.
in rehab, I have a beautiful life today, and I
Yeah.
have a wife that I love, who I wouldn't dream of cheating on.
Yeah.
And I know the same of her.
Yeah.
I got 2 teenage boys who've never seen their daddy drunk or high.
That's
Yeah, you can't
beautiful.
beat that, man.
Yeah,
That is
you
beautiful.
really can't.
Yeah.
So I'm really grateful.
Yeah.
And that's
Oh,
my
yeah.
nickel story.
Yeah, man, that's amazing, man. I love it. Like you said, you hearing, like when I went through treatment, it was important to me to see that the people there teaching everything that they meant it as much as I wanted to learn it. And I got that from your treatment center, man. Hearing you would come speak to us, like once a week or sometimes twice a week. And you'd give some of your testimony and seeing how much you believed in it. And, that poured into the rest of us. I think it brought us together as a group of recovering addicts together while we were there, because we got to see the fire and the passion that you had. And it fired me up. My roommate that I had, for a while there, Josh McDade, he carried a clipboard around like you're talking, and that helped me out too. I saw that it's okay to be the nerd in treatment. It's we're working on saving our lives. It's important. It's okay to be nerdy. It's okay to. The first time I went through treatment, I said that I was selling out because I was giving into all the therapy and stuff like that, and I don't mind that. I don't mind selling out to the therapy and that because it saved my life. And it's important. I wanted to touch a little on, you were saying that like we need to evolve our treatment, the way that we're able to treat addicts. And I touched on this a little bit in the last episode that we did. I love, NA and AA, those programs are great and they're helping a lot of people. And I just feel that those as programs too could grow a little. My brother-in-law's in AA and it saved his life. It's the 12 steps are beautiful. They're a great way to live. They're a great way to help us. And they're the principles behind the steps are awesome. But I've had a couple issues with like the anonymity thing. I feel like being anonymous in these programs is killing us. It's giving a stigma on addicts, saying that we're doing something wrong, we need to hide. And I don't feel like we need to hide anymore. Huddy touched a little bit on the fact that when we were hiding in AA before, it was because it was an old program from like the 50s or 30s or 40s. It's an older thing where you couldn't admit having any type of issue back then, let alone a mental illness. And But now as addicts, we can admit to things like that, and by putting the stigma on it, I feel like it's killing people. It's making people not be able to come out and say, look, I have this problem, I need help, and go to these places. Like you said, you had to lie to all your friends and family before you went in there.
Right.
I did the same thing. I did the same thing, and for me, it made me not go to the program for so long because I was ashamed of doing it. What's your views on that?
I still this morning went to an AA meeting.
They're beautiful. Don't get me wrong.
I would call myself as somebody who's in.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, there's an organization, Faces and Voices of Recovery, which is really made a pronounced effort to spread the message and not be anonymous.
Okay.
However, the AA, the NA, the HA, the various 12-step fellowships maintain that as one of their principles, which for 80 plus years have worked very well. And I personally believe it's divine.
Okay.
And shouldn't be messed with.
Okay.
Now, I think there's places like Refuge Recovery, which is a Buddhist recovery program. I think there's programs like Smart Recovery.
Yeah.
And I love other programs.
Right.
And that's wonderful. But I think, they recently, not recently, but they came out with a 4th edition of the big book. And at some point in my ego, I said, I'm going to help them write the 5th edition because they needed to clean up the gender.
Right.
It talks all about he and stuff.
Yeah.
And to me, I'd like to make the 5th edition.
Yeah.
And do gender. And I recognize, you know what? Shut up, Marlon. That's just your ego.
Yeah.
I'm just a bozo on the bus.
Yeah. Okay.
And I had a really good conversation with my kid about it. It was like, there's really 2 perspectives you can have. I could feel that I'm really special and I'm going to change the world and I'm the man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I could feel that there's 7 billion people on this planet. We're all moving around, and we're here for an infinitesimal second.
Yeah.
In the sense of the cosmos, and it really I'm a garden variety alcoholic, and by taking that approach, I'm more relaxed. I could take a breath. There's less pressure on me. Now, I try to do the right thing. I try to, when I pray to God and I wonder what the heck God wants me to do. Right. This morning, Dave would have liked to have tied up my wife and take a Viagra and fuck her 3 times. To me, what does God want me to do?
Right,
He'd probably prefer me to go to a meeting. I went to a memorial service at 9 after the meeting for a boy who I talked to a bunch of times, and then he succumbed to the disease. And when we got there, they gave us shirts, and they had these little, it looked like those little footballs I used to play with in grade school, where you slide that little loose leaf paper that was folded.
Yeah.
So they gave me one of those triangles, and I opened it up, and each one of them had a butterfly in it.
Oh, wow.
So we opened it up and we let a butterfly go on behalf of Jacob Townsend.
Oh, that's beautiful,
and today was a memorial. His mom was there crying, and there was another lady who, interestingly enough, she had a son who was in with Reza with you.
Really?
And she said, could you call him and help him? So I've been texting him.
Oh, that's awesome.
There's still people out there suffering, and even though I'd like to do what Dave wants to do, when I just settle down and try to do what I think God wants me to do, I end up being way happier, way more productive, a more decent human.
That's beautiful. I really respect that. That's amazing, man. And you still continue to do so much for the rest of us addicts. You're able to give back so much coming on this podcast, man, and just sharing your story. I think it's beautiful, man. I really appreciate it. I'm a recovering addict, and I appreciate the opportunity. I love what you guys are doing. My buddy Andy, who's over there, he's been dreaming about starting a podcast. Oh, dude, you got to do it, Andy.
So it's really cool that he gets to see this.
Yeah.
If he gets a minute, maybe we'll sub out and let him do a cameo.
Let's do it. Yeah, you want to come on, Andy?
Of course.
Let's do it, man. Yeah. Thank you, Dave.
All right.
We're good?
Yep.
All right. Sorry, we paused there for a second. Dave's subbing out with Andy here. Andy, thank you for coming on, man. This is awesome.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
So you're thinking about starting up a podcast yourself?
Well, Dave and I have been talking. We've actually we're getting ready to launch a nonprofit called Vegas Stronger.
Oh, beautiful.
And our mission is pretty simple. We want to try to inspire people to get involved in social good causes in Las Vegas, and
Awesome.
and become less self-centered and more giving to this community. And then we also want to try to be a voice and a spotlight for those nonprofits that are helping.
Yeah.
So addiction's a huge issue.
Giant.
Poverty, homelessness, all of those. They're all tied into really addiction.
Right.
When it comes down to, and the mental health, and it's the ripple effect of how it impacts the community. So we want to create content and start the conversation and get people engaged. Very similar to what you're doing.
That's
That's
awesome.
cool.
Yeah, that's what it takes. I think it starts with conversation. It starts getting people aware of what's going on, because even though people know there's an epidemic going on out there, they're still kind of blind to the insides of it. Nobody hears our stories really, or really sits down and listens to us, and by giving people a voice, I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
There's like there's a bunch of different ways that we can look at it. It all depends on what our personal experience is. But the reality is, if you can put a human face on what's happening, then there's more humanity, there's more compassion, and then there's more inspiration to make a difference.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Right.
I want to hear a little bit about your story. What was life like for you leading up to recovery, and what made you go get sober?
Necessity. It was either roll over or die or get sober.
Yeah.
So my story is very similar probably to yours, and there's a lot of things about my story that you can probably acknowledge and recognize, and it's a little bit different than Dave's, though. I grew up in a wonderful family with loving parents who were still together, great brothers and sisters, and we were always provided for. We didn't have any crazy childhood trauma. I just happened to have that gene that's common for alcoholism that can be traced all the way back through my ancestors to Ireland. And
same with mine.
Infamous.
Right. But there was, growing up, I was unaware, but there's that one common theme for alcoholics is that we just never felt like we were connected to. There was always that feeling that there was something wrong.
Almost like for me, I could connect with every group, but not really fit in with any single group.
Right. And as I look back, it's like, wow, I became the greatest chameleon, because I never felt like I was good enough to be a part of it. And I worked so hard on developing this personality that allowed me to seamlessly blend in and thrive. And it's been great for me, my personality, and having so many friends, but also at the same time, it's prevented me from accepting who I truly am, or even doing any kind of work to discover who I am. Absolutely. And that's, that was the problem. So I had my first drink later in high school. I had a great high school experience, and was an all-state athlete and student council president all 4 years, and was popular, never had problems with girlfriends, and A and B student. And then I had my first drink when I was 17. Right before my senior year, and it was like, wow.
Woke up the beast.
Yeah, it was. All of a sudden, I became aware that there was something wrong.
Right.
And that I found the solution. And so I got insanely drunk that night, and then I wanted to be insanely drunk every other time. Very quickly, my heroes became John Belushi and Jim Morrison.
As one naturally would.
I went to college, and I just remember I went to school at University of Illinois. I grew up outside of Chicago, and the first thing I did was I went and I knocked on everybody's door in my dorm. I lived in a co-ed dorm, and I introduced myself, and I'm like, I'm throwing a little soiree in my room.
Soiree, he says.
So I went to, I'm like, it's a toga party. Put a sheet on and just come to my room. And,
trust me.
Right. And I went to the liquor store with my roommate, and we paid a homeless guy to get us all this booze, and we threw this bash. And And there was a bunch of people there, and it was flowing out in the hallway. And of course, we got busted, and so I got written up and in trouble my very first night before school even started.
Oh, man.
And that was my college experience. Is
Oh,
that I
my
was
goodness.
constantly on probation, university censorship for like behaviors, and like I was always transferring schools because my grades were bad, and I would be put on probation. And then if you transferred departments, then you could start fresh. And I figured out how to work the system. And
Sounds like me with jobs when I first got out of high school.
right.
Yeah, till you run out of fresh starts.
Right. But alcohol was working for me then, and the party
Right,
scene was working for me, and I'm like, okay, so I probably knew that I was an alcoholic, but
Right.
there's two parts of that first step: is that we're powerless over alcohol, which is what I loved, that feeling,
Yeah.
and that our life's unmanageable. So I would have this definition of manageability, like
Right.
I'm still enrolled in school, I still have the girlfriend, I still have a job, I haven't gotten arrested. And there's like no serious problems. And
I
then
had a similar effect with like even when I went into treatment this last time. I mean, I was smoking meth literally leading
Right.
up to it, but I was still able to keep a job.
I still
and-
have a job. I still have a roof over my head.
Yeah.
Everything's fine.
and then it becomes, well, I can get a job really quick, so I'm okay with
Right,
that, and I can always
right.
replace the girlfriend,
Yeah.
and I'm only doing meth on the weekends, right?
yeah, recreational meth use.
Yeah.
And it's like we change our definition or the metrics for evaluation on our life to
Right.
fit the lifestyle that we're doing.
Right.
And then eventually what happens is alcoholism, drug addiction, it's progressive. It gets out of control. And then
Yeah,
we
yeah.
can't lower our standards fast enough to meet the nosedive that we're doing.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and so then we become faced with a decision. It's either make a change, and decide that I want to live a sober life, or
Yeah.
or roll over and die. Like, what do they say? Jails, institutions, or
Or
death.
Oh my. yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really
on.
does come down to that. I mean, I've been to 2 out of the 3 of those, jails,
Right,
institutions.
right.
Same with Hoodie. I mean, well, I was in jail for a very little tiny bit.
Right.
Hoodie was locked away.
All right, it's not a pissing contest. Right. We've both been there.
But
other stories, right?
but yeah, and it really takes some of that to knock us straight a little bit. And what was your experience like when you decided to go get help? And
So it's been, my experience has been surrender, and then not completely destroying my ego, and then taking it back. So I had my first drink at 17, and I hit my first AA/Cocaine Anonymous meeting when I was like 20 or 21.
okay.
Right, so I crashed, and as soon as
Real hard,
what happened to me is like I was a raging alcoholic party guy that was able to somehow maintain in life, but then the minute I found cocaine, it was like 6 months later I'm on my knees, and that thing just
Right.
buried me.
Yeah.
And
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
right, so
Yeah,
I
same.
would tap out because AA was the last house in the block, and I'd burned it all down to the ground.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
and then I surrender, and I do those things that they recommend us doing,
Right.
meeting every day, finding a sponsor, getting into the steps,
Yeah.
helping other people, getting a commitment, just those simple spiritual actions, and
Yeah.
finding God. And then what with the the nature of our diseases, the farther we get away from that last drink,
Mm-hmm.
the easier it is for us to forget what it was like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Which
then
becomes dangerous,
very dangerous.
Very dangerous.
And so my story is that I'll get sober for a while, and then I'll get 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, and then I'll forget. And
Right.
my priority will no longer be recovery. My priority then becomes my job, or
Right.
whatever the lifestyle is that I think.
Right.
Well, and that's why me and Saul talk a lot about, as far as never forgetting what you've been through, and to talk about it. We go on and on about sometimes people get glorifying and revisiting our history confused, and so we think it is important to keep talking about what's happened in our life so we don't forget, because it's easy
Absolutely.
to forget, and then next thing you know, there you are back at square one.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. So true.
So it's been for me, it's been about 20 years of that roller coaster ride until I finally was like, nothing else matters in my life. If there's one thing I do in life, it's stay sober today.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, with that mentality, one day at a time,
Right.
everything else in your life blows up beyond your wildest imagination.
Oh, yeah.
The relationships, the peace of mind, the transition from being a totally self-centered person that can only think about themselves to somebody that's useful and thinks about others. That's an amazing awakening that happens.
Yeah.
And then, you know, financial things come back, your career blossoms, all of that stuff happens.
I find that change of when we get out of thinking about ourselves, like I didn't even realize how into myself I was, you know, like I didn't realize how self-centered I was being. And when I did start to kind of be able to help other people out, just small little things. I'm still so new in sobriety. I still need to be working on me. But I noticed just the little bit that I can do takes me out of my head for a minute, and I lose that desire, that obsession for just a little bit, man. And it's amazing.
Right. Yeah, it is. You know, there's like this theory. I'm starting to get deep into meditation now, and so I'm been meditating more to try to quiet my mind and to kind of see things a little bit differently. And you know, there's
do you do like guided meditation or what?
I do a bunch. I'll sit in silence. I'll do music in the background or some Tibetan bells, and I also do some guided meditation for like abundance and things. And you know, I think that all we as human beings, all we're seeking is some sort of a spiritual experience. We want to experience whatever it is we define as God or that higher power.
Right.
And when we found that when we were doing drugs, we found that God-like experience.
Right.
And so, you know, the Big Book tells us that that our disease really is kind of threefold. Is number one is that obsession of thought, that obsession of the mind.
Yeah.
Right.
When we feel too high or too low or uncomfortable, then our thought goes to, I need to escape this feeling.
Absolutely.
And then once we have that, then, you know, that physical allergy kicks in.
And that's the part of the book that I have issues with, is the allergy, because people always tell me, you know, go read the doctor's opinion, and I read it, and it says it's allergy part, and I've seen too many people go out thinking, I have an allergy, right? So my allergy is to heroin because I'm a heroin addict. Doesn't mean I'm allergic to alcohol, you know, just like, you know, if I'm allergic to apples, doesn't mean I'm allergic to oranges. I'm not allergic to all fruit. So then people go out, they think, okay, well, since my allergy was heroin, I can still drink. And then they start drinking again, and it screws everything up. But we know, just like with all medicine, it's a practice, and it grows. And that doctor had all the information he had at the time. But we know now it's incorrect. We know that the disease is in the choices in our midbrain. We know that it's no longer an allergy. It's proven, and I don't know why they won't grow or update the book.
We may think the same thing, and maybe let me put it to you in this perspective. As an alcoholic or a cocaine addict, what happens is, another way that they define that allergy or describe it in the Big Book is it's the phenomenon of physical craving.
Gotcha.
So when I have that first drink, what separates me from somebody that's not an alcoholic is that when I have that first drink, the phenomenon of physical craving kicks in, and it's like this insatiable appetite for alcohol that kicks in, and I no longer have the power of choice. I'm totally powerless over what's going to happen next. You know, if I put it down after 3 drinks, that's a blessing, you know, but the thing that's been proven to me is that if I start drinking, it's very possible that I'll end up in a hotel room drinking myself to death 2 weeks down the road, unable to stop on my own. So it's that.
I see what you're saying, but it starts before the first drink. It starts before that phenomenon right there.
That's an obsession.
It's the obsession, and it stems from a part of our brain where we crave food, where we have our fight, flight, freeze, or fuck. You know, it's more than just an allergy. An allergy would be our body fighting back against itself for something. You know, this is more of an obsession, an impulse control disease. It's what it is. Located in the part of our brain that pumps our heart, that makes us breathe when we're doing things when we're not thinking. And it can't just be fought before it can't be fought, you know, to try to stop the first drink. It has to be much more before that. It has to be a retraining of all of our actions. Just like if you were to send a soldier to war, you know, if a gunfight breaks out, normal people, our instincts are going to be run away from the fight, you know.
Right.
But they take these soldiers and they break them down to where their cognitive behaviors are their cognitive functions are thinking, and they're you know, they deprive them of food and sleep, and then it makes it so that when they do hear the gunfight, they go towards it. I feel like the same thing has to be with our addiction, and I think we're kind of saying the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, so we can split hairs on the definition of allergy or whatever, but you know, there's a third part that they talk about in the big book, and this is like, to me, this is the most important thing, and it's that spiritual malady, right?
Yeah.
That feeling inside.
Yeah.
And so the only thing that I found that works for me long term is Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm not saying there aren't other things that work, but for me, my personal experience,
I've seen it save many lives.
And so I look at that first 164 pages of the big book as kind of Bible for me, and there's a segment in there that talks about if we solve the spiritual malady, our mental obsession and our physical allergy falls in line. If we're able to treat that spiritual malady inside, that feeling of just not feeling good or just feeling disconnected from the world.
Right.
Exactly.
So the meditation to me helps me understand. It just helps me understand and develop a clear definition of God.
Yeah.
And what that relationship looks like. And, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous gives us a set of spiritual actions, which are just basically any kind of action that feeds the soul. When I'm drinking, or when I'm doing drugs, or I'm doing things that really focus in the material world,
right?
That's kind of cutting the oxygen off to my spirit.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And when I'm doing things that is more focused on selfless giving, helping other people from as close to altruistic perspective as I can be is really what feeds my soul.
Absolutely.
And it's finding a way to live life that way on a one day at a time, on a day-to-day basis. I think, and that's kind of what I've learned from Alcoholics Anonymous, that's what's going to solve my spiritual malady.
Yeah.
And that I don't ever have to worry about that phenomenon of physical craving kicking in, because that if I'm at peace with who I am and what I'm doing, then that mental obsession doesn't kick in.
Yeah.
And then if the mental obsession doesn't kick in, I never have to take that first drink.
Right.
Yeah, kind of relates back to the study on mice that we were talking about
a few
episodes ago.
Yeah, I think I call it the Harvard study, and I almost guarantee it's actually called the Stanford study. And where they put the mice that were addicted to cocaine, you know, they kept hitting the cocaine button instead of getting food. But then when they put them in an environment where, you know, there was things to do, there was a playground, there were other little mice women to run around with. They no longer wanted it. Yeah.
Because they were connected.
Yeah. Well, Andy, I want to thank you for coming on, man.
Yeah,
and thank you, Dave, as well. You know, this has been awesome, guys.
Yeah.
And I hope you get your podcast started. I'd love to come on if you'll have me sometime.
Wonderful, Saul. Thanks, guys.
Both of you.
That'd be great.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
That'd be
All
awesome.
right.
So I just want to remind everybody, go to our website at thisournormalpodcast.com. You can see everything about us on there. And please go to iTunes, rate us 5 stars, and give us a comment on iTunes. It really helps us out. We really appreciate everybody doing that. And that's it. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Agent Bob is going to take us off.
Hey little Sally, what you got in that sack? You're looking tough, like you ain't coming back. Hey little Sammy, when are you going to fly? Times are rough, people get tough, but you got the stuff